More Than Rich podcast. Today I am here with Alexandra Dotcheva, a multifaceted professional with roots in Bulgaria, transitioning from a violinist with a doctorate in musical arts to a dedicated RN. Your journey reflects adaptability and a passion for health and education, an entrepreneur at heart, also a real estate investor and holistic coach. I understand you have a book called It Really Is Simple, A Holistic Approach to Self-Confidence. And if I'm not mistaken, it's about empowering others to achieve holistic success and financial independence. Does that sound right?
Yes, Joseph. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I want to begin. I usually ask all my guests about like their early life and their background growing up. So I found it super interesting, like very ambitious pursuits that you have, like in your life of music and RN. Like it's very different, like I'm trying to understand how you became creative to begin with. So can you go into your like background growing up as a musician, your influences, what shaped you?
Yes, of course. So the musician background from the parents, both parents were musicians, and I was born in a formal socialist country where being a classical musician was a prestigious thing. And also knowing that the country wasn't going on a good path, I was programmed as a child that I had to study abroad once I grew up and get out of Bulgaria. And my parents were both pretty ambitious. They taught me the discipline, the work ethic. I was practicing many, many hours a day from an early age. And the problem was, though, I didn't always have patience with the practice. And my dad and I always got into conflicts as to how I should practice. And I was rushing myself because I think very fast, but the fingers and the hands needed their time to actually master the technique and everything, because violin is a very hard instrument, like most instruments, right? And by the time I was late teenage, I already knew that I wasn't as good as I should have been, although I was told I was very good. But classmates that were nearly at my level earlier in our student lives became climbing their level and
Wow.
surpassing me. And it created a huge complex, horrible self-confidence. I mean, the confidence issue started very early because I was a socially awkward child to begin with. And I didn't know how to embrace this as an advantage, because it's very hard when you're a kid to embrace social awkwardness as an
For
advantage. It
sure.
actually gives you more time instead of
I relate
socializing with
completely.
babies. You can actually, you know, but the practice was my escape in a way, and trying to do it well, at least in the family, to show that I was trying to be a hardworking student and all that. But by my early 20s, I had this awful stage fright, bad stage fright. I couldn't, exhibit even 100%. I could not perform at 100%, but maybe 75, 60%. And that was very unsatisfying for me. And I didn't know how to fix it because none of my parents was a psychologist or like a confidence, like performance coach. And they were just wondering what was wrong with me. And mostly I was wondering what was wrong with me. But I think creativity went the bad way because somehow, and I apologize if there are noises, Joseph, but we have jets flying on top of the house all the time and low. But the creativity had to do with, in my early age, I basically conditioned myself to not expect anything good in any event and always expect the worst and emphasize the worst things in the event rather than focus on the positives. I emphasize the negatives. And that ate into my mindset over the next 10 years in puberty and early 20s. And before I knew it, I was trapped in my own mindset of an unsuccessful person, a person who couldn't achieve as much as it was expected from her to achieve, because to go abroad and win an audition to a prestigious college, you really had to be very good and socially good and all that stuff, know how to integrate yourself into certain foreign cultures.
Yeah,
And that
it's
was
not
the
enough to just be, it sounds like it's not enough to just be talented, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There are so many requirements, but we weren't taught these things in school. And today it's not much different with schools because they teach people stuff that really isn't that relevant in real life. And the worst case was in our generation in Bulgaria because specialized music school for 12 years. So you mostly learn music subjects, minimal science and other trivia subjects that would propel you into real life. So quite handicapped in that way. So you're only way to exist is really you're between four walls. You practice 7 to 9 hours a day, sometimes 11 hours. You're
Wow.
not getting paid because you're perfecting yourself like a beginning sports professional, right? They dedicate just as much time for their practice. And by late 20s, I had horrible complexes with my performance and overall my skills because when you practice so many hours for so many years, you should be able to do better, but I wasn't. And then miraculously, I came to the States, earned my master's and doctoral in music. I made great progress and all that, but then the economy crashed and the orchestra started bankrupting left and right in the United States
Wow.
because I don't know if you know, but in Europe, there's a lot of government support in many countries for their culture, for the classical cultural orchestras, theaters, all that. And in America, it's not like that. We really rely on rich people who like to support the orchestras, but it's not a government initiative. So when they started
Wow.
bankrupting, 2006, I'm like, okay, I've been a violinist now for what, like 25, 24, 25, 26 years. By 2008, when the crash really happened, and that's when I had to put a stop to all this because I needed a real profession. I needed to learn science, things I never had learned before. So that was a horrible crisis moment. But in hindsight, it was a great year because I completely reversed my life from there. And then came the nursing and then the real estate investing and the building of the confidence by solving problems and learning new challenging things.
A doctorate in music is just, I can't even imagine, because reading music is super hard for me. So I'll just have to give it up for that. But I'm trying to see, like, in life, how do you correlate with music? Like, do you see music like a part of human nature? Do you tie this into, like, I don't know, like behaviors? Like, how have you noticed it affecting, like, just us on a grand scale? Are there any specific nuances that you picked up? Because I mean, there's
The
there's a
music,
bigger study of just music, right?
oh, of course, of course. I mean, depending which branch of music you're in, I mean, classical music versus pop versus jazz. I mean, there's so many types of music, and within each genre, many different styles and you name it. But music is like books. Depending what music you listen, that's how it affects you. And same with books. Depending what you choose to read, that's the type of person you become, right? And the more versatile taste you have and understanding of music, just like with books, the more versatile person you become. Let's see, to the present day, I listen to classical music every day. I don't play it anymore because you either practice or you don't practice, right? But my perception of music evolved or mutated, if you wish, in a very strange way because when I started delving in finances to develop my real estate businesses, Baroque music makes my mind think creatively financially, which was never the case before. But it just
Interesting.
integrated finances and numbers with this type of music makes it very orderly and I could create a plan for 2 years ahead.
So
Okay.
basically, you can go into flow state easier, like to work is easier with that type of music. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, but I only listen to the music during my relaxation moments. I never listen to music when I work. So
Interesting.
the two things are very separate. I've never been able to focus while listening music. I don't know how people do it. To me, that's multitasking. So my brain doesn't work that way. But when I'm not working, when I'm relaxing, like before and after meditation, say, listen to the music, and then ideas come and flow. But while I'm doing the work, I don't listen to music. I have to separate myself.
I guess one of the reasons also I was asking about, like, the human nature and culture aspect is because when we talk about funding not being available, how are these countries different in that aspect? Like, let's say a country does have more resources for, orchestras and how are, not just the economy, but how is it different in the cultures if you have more money for entertainment and
It's just
things?
the tradition and the values that are cultivated in people from very young age that culture is extremely important for your nation's survival. I mean, take Germany, take Italy, France, England,
I don't
these
I don't
countries.
relate at all. I'm just in shock why you're saying this right now, because I feel like Americans don't have this. You know what I'm saying?
No, no. What happened after World War II when you guys were these huge winners after the war? Then they create the big orchestras. The great orchestras were created then because they wanted to mimic the European model, right? They wanted
Wow.
us to be America to be as cultured as Europe was because they recognized the cultural advantage of Europe in terms of classical music and arts in general. And at that time, fantastic orchestras were really created and boomed, the biggest, awesome orchestras. But I don't know how gradually, through several decades, that whole appreciation fell through. And I mean, like the music schools, the programs in the schools, the funding stopped and all that. But it's, to my understanding, it's mostly have been private initiative, not so much government initiative like it's in Europe. And I have to say, though, in Europe also many orchestras got cut off and disappeared after 2008, but nothing like in America. That was a different process. But they have the tradition because that's where the roots of this music started, with the aristocrats being the sponsors, the employers of the great composers, and all the tradition with the playing of the instruments. And it's just a century-long tradition. I mean, you can't reproduce this in a couple of decades on a different continent if you didn't have it to begin with. But the quality of the orchestras that were created here is astounding. Absolute world-class orchestras. Obviously, you have Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, LA. These are amazing orchestras. And in fact, my employer, the Syracuse Symphony Orchestra, which was not an orchestra like these big orchestras were, but when it bankrupted in 2011, 10 days later, Philadelphia declared bankruptcy. And that's when I cried. I cried when I heard that, because that is a world-class instrument, this orchestra, and I couldn't believe that was happening. It was unreal.
Yeah, it's almost like a bridge falling apart. No, like a metaphor, because that just happened, yesterday, I believe. But that feels like a main structural, people's identity. Is that what we're getting at?
Yes, and their whole necessity for, I mean, how do you define identity unless you have some kind of a predisposition for cultural nourishment and it's
Wow,
spiritual.
never heard
The
that
way
before.
the need changed, because of the internet, because when the recording industry crashed because of iTunes, YouTube, and all that, it was already, the writing was on the wall that once YouTube and these free recordings
Wow,
were all over the place, and the piracy and everything, we were dying. We knew we were
still
dying.
the
And so,
same problems, and if not even worse now, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. And the publishing world is the same thing with the electronic books and artificial intelligence, where you can't even prove that somebody actually wrote the book or didn't write the book, because AI and people don't have the brains, they don't spend enough time to learn the language properly, let alone write the book, but they do it for
Yeah.
profit. So now we're involving AI. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So unauthentic.
I do wonder though, like, do you find yourself having to adopt it anyway, like just tweaking it and using it to your advantage eventually, or are you
Absolutely.
really hard?
No, you have to challenge your brain. If you completely stop challenging your brain and start using AI, you might as well be dead. You're
See,
useless.
I love that you have that perspective though, because you're upset at it, but you also use it, like you're not letting the fact that it's like taking over deter you from like your own feelings against it. That doesn't mean that you're going to not use it. I like that. Like you
Right.
see its value.
But I will not use it to write a book with it.
For sure.
Right. I mean, I will always
Yeah.
do my research. I'll always put everything in my own words, through my experience.
Mhm. Yeah. Original thought can't be replaced. I understand that for sure.
Not. Mm-hmm.
Another question I had was, so as a DJ earlier in my life, I gained this skill to kind of correlate song keys with colors. Have you ever because now I can hear songs and then just be like, oh, it's like E minor, and then I associate it with purple. And maybe that's not even the color it really is. But I'm just trying to think, do you have any like feelings or abilities like that where you hear music differently than just hearing the song, you see it differently?
When I hear music, I imagine the note sheet and I see it written in front of me when I hear it.
Nice.
I have not dealt with colors like other people do, like you're saying, but I've heard this before. Some people associate with colors. I haven't done that. I didn't. My mindset didn't feel the need to do that, but I always see it written in front of me when I hear it.
I do feel like the color usually reflects the emotion of the song. I don't know if that makes sense. Like a green would be energy, or like, yeah,
It could, depending how you view colors, because different people view different colors different way, depending on their experience, right? So I haven't had to deal with colors through music or music through colors, but I just see the note sheet, and I have photographic memory for many things also. So once I see the note sheet, I already remember it in many cases.
And another cool thing is the fact that you can correlate song keys with the actual feelings, different emotions for each song key. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh yeah, I've read a
Like,
lot about it. Many composers use that, share that same experience. Yes, absolutely.
interesting. So you do believe though that depending on what you're feeling, you can even tailor your own words and lyrics to the emotion of the actual song. Like there's an actual, I don't want to say format, but there's like a scientific way you can make music in a sense, right?
You could, but there is a lot of science in the various music techniques and approaches that have been used through the centuries, but that's a different type of science of what you're talking about. But it's not a formulaic thing. I mean, you always have to find a way to be creative and authentic, because if it all fits into a formula, it's not a creative process anymore. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that. Can you elaborate on that? Like examples where you see people do that and it is not good?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the contemporary music industry, the music that's played in the gyms. It's awful. It's all the same. It's written by the same person. The singers don't create their music anymore, or rarely do they do that. It's unbearable to listen to. It might as well not exist. It's nothing like
I'm
what was written through the centuries creatively, using people's own brains, hearts, souls, and minds. It's nothing like this right now, because there are lots of composers, quote unquote, who don't know how to read or write music. They just hum into a machine, into a device, and then they reproduce, and they call themselves composers. They have no clue what they're talking or doing.
That is interesting. So, um, I think I'm just gonna keep going. I had more questions on music, but it'll come back to me. That's it's just like I feel like I can ask you anything music related, so I appreciate that. Can you share
Well,
like particular moments from your childhood that sparked your interest in both the arts and the sciences?
I loved animals. We studied minimal biology and minimal math in school, but what biology we studied was absolutely fascinating to me. I was I had spiders in my house in jars. My parents were very tolerant in hindsight when I think about them. They wouldn't let me goof around with children very much because I had to practice the violin. So I accused them of being very stern. But as far as the spiders on our balcony, and considering that we were sharing a three-bedroom apartment with three other family members, and my parents and I were in the same bedroom, and there was this tiny balcony that was completely full with my mother's shoes, books everywhere, and clothes and boxes, and there was this little tiny doll stroller that was for me when I was 3 years old to play with my doll. So that doll stroller became my storage for the jars with the spiders that I was, cultivating, and I had frogs at some point. But biology and science, that's where, because I read tons of books about arachnoids. I was fascinated. They had babies and all that. And my mother hates these things, but she still let me have them in the jars and feed them with
Wow.
ants. That lasted for 4 years, mind you. And
Oh my
so my
gosh.
interest in science, I just wanted to have something specific that I could make grow and reproduce and prove that I could do it. So that was to me a big scientific experiment, because nobody in the music school do that. So I was the biggest nerd growing up
Wow.
for this out of
Interesting.
many other reasons. But yeah, so interest in science, and it was disappointing that we studied so little biology, so like very, very minimal. And so when time came to decide to become a nurse, I had to start from scratch too, but the interest and the love was there. So I think that's what helped quite a bit.
Interesting. Are
And
you
the
like
interest in the
super in?
arts was from my parents. The interest, that was the other part of your question. Sorry, the interest in the arts was from my parents. My dad started playing recordings of Brahms and Beethoven when I was 2 years old. The first two composers I heard were Brahms and Beethoven. He played symphonies, so I could get accustomed to this type of music. So they started me very early. I mean, we lived in Mexico for 3 years, and my dad was a double bass player in the Philharmónica de la Ciudad de México. So my mother, not having a babysitter, she dragged me to concerts since age 3, symphony concerts. I was entertaining the entire audience. So, but yeah, it started
Interesting.
early.
Did did you have like an interest in holistic medicine before you got into being an RN?
Yes, yes, because I was seeing how helpless many doctors were with my very sick relatives. Now, my relatives had chronic diseases that were completely reversible, but I didn't know this at the time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, they will never change their lifestyles. But the doctors were essentially helpless in kind of maintaining them barely alive, barely functional. And my relatives were happy with that. So I knew there was something else. And I did go into holistic books. Then I learned there were many things that weren't really proven. Then I came to the States. And once I entered the nursing, the workforce 12 years ago, 13 years ago, then I saw the whole apparatus, the machine that actually would not fund holistic research because they didn't like the competition and the fact that it was much more affordable than the actual traditional medicine. So then I saw that side of the whole equation in between proof and not proof. Okay, who wants to fund the actual research of plants and healing properties of plants and medicinal foods, as opposed to the pharmaceutical companies that put all the money into their research and determine the programs that the young doctors study in medical school, what to put in their brains as far as what's possible to heal and what's not possible to heal, and let's maintain it for decades so we can keep them sick for as long as possible. All that stuff came later. But yeah, holistic medicine was always very interesting to me.
I don't want to lose these two thoughts, but one, I have the question of what was the real big difference of coming to America, like the main culture shocks, like what could you not believe, what was hard to adjust, and then my other questions about classical music. Just I've heard the notion that the time period doesn't exist anymore, so that makes it even more special. Like the sounds, frequencies can't be replicated because the instruments don't exist, right? So I'm just curious
The
on your thoughts on that.
instruments the
But the
instruments do it.
of that time period, of the time period,
There are
of the
period
same
instruments.
material.
Yes,
Interesting. Okay.
period instruments. There are many orchestras that use period instruments to play the classical music of the composers that lived in that area. Europe has tons
Wow.
of orchestras. America has several orchestras. If you research period instrument orchestras, you will find galore. Like Christopher Hogwood, the Academy of Ancient Music.
And I'm
Uh,
guessing it's super expensive instruments, right?
if they're made by contemporary makers with the same principle, using the same principles as before, they're not as expensive as the instruments that were made during that era. Okay, because they
But
grow in
they do they
value and
perform with those? They perform with instruments from that era still?
those, yes, museums have them, some collectors have them. If you're a very super special talented person and your government in Europe decides to grant you this instrument to play while you're an active musician,
Wow.
it's a big deal. But
Wow.
some of these instruments, they go in the millions of dollars prices.
Wow.
And so the musicians
Just
can't afford them, but a rich person can let them use the instrument because they're so good that they wanted to be able to have the best instrument possible to play this wonderful music.
what about what I was going at was just like the notion that kind of music doesn't exist anymore. Was that what the have you heard this before? What I'm trying to get at? It's just some idea of it not being able to be replicated from that time period. I don't know if you agree with that. Like
I
that's
do
what makes it so special.
because we don't have the recordings of how exactly they played in the 1700s and 1800s. We don't have recordings from that. We can only guess from their writings because there were music critics and
Ah,
music theorists even then. And with the schooling, with all the instructions how these were to be played, but of course the skills of the performance evolved throughout time. However, when you hear these pieces and some of them are so insanely difficult that you cannot help but understand that they were extremely gifted and talented and skilled musicians back then that wrote that music and they played it and they made their students play that music. So they must have been pretty damn
whoa.
good. We just don't know because we don't have didn't have the recording technique, the technology back then to actually how did they play it? I'm very curious to know that.
But we have the same instruments though. So that's interesting. It's not like they had some foreign technology that we're not aware of, right?
Correct. The instruments, they gradually evolved over time. The contemporary instrument is different from the instruments 300 years ago, but like I said, they build instruments that are very similar. They follow that same model of 300 years ago to do the period instrument orchestras. And some orchestras use authentic instruments, as a matter of fact.
Can you give me a few examples of like the type of musicians who are that intricate that you would compare?
You mean names?
Yeah, just for the
Yes.
viewers to look them up just to learn.
So Simon Standish, the violinist, he's one of in England. He had this great career with an all period instrument player, and then you have the Köln instrumentalists. They all have their own soloists. You have the Academy of Ancient Music with Christopher Hogo. Then you have the orchestra of John Elliott Gardiner. In America, there are several groups in Massachusetts. I forget the names right now, but I mean, there are many, many orchestras that play period instruments. They started a few, and then now they're like 20 or 30 that you can find, and they're outstanding, outstanding music. The musicians of Cologne, just great. And on YouTube, of course, you can find them. And it's better to buy their recordings to support them, of course. But I know the temptation to listen for free. So
So coming to America, that idea of a culture shock, anything that surprised you that you weren't used to?
yes, at the time, I was
Everything.
very shocked that people were complaining much less than my compatriots in Bulgaria were complaining. Complaining was not very popular here. So I was shocked because I was a big complainer when I came here. Now it's different. Now there are lots of complainers in America that are Americans. Because I've been here 24 years, okay? So I've seen that change. But when I came here, I was very surprised that people were really calm. They were dealing with their problems without much fuss about it, and they weren't complaining very much. And that really pissed me off because I thought you should really express your feelings in the most robust and clear way that there was something was wrong, it was wrong, you have to say it, you have to reiterate it until it gets fixed. But they weren't doing this here, and they were still living excellent lives, much better lives than my people in Bulgaria. And so that was a big learning curve, how to achieve what you wanted without setting the world on fire.
That makes me wonder, though, if that's why we don't get things done, because we don't have that attitude that you're talking about.
Yeah, but we don't either. I mean, the attitude of only complaining and doing nothing about it. That's the
Okay,
worst
I
thing,
get
and
you.
that's where I came from. Okay, expecting somebody else to fix your problems. Unfortunately, this mindset has spread here quite a bit now in the younger
Yeah.
generations. Very, very sad. But it wasn't that way when I came here. And people were saying, oh, my younger children, they're big complainers that they're expecting other people to do things for them. I said, no, no way, that doesn't happen in America, you know. And then I see, oh, yeah, it's happening. It's happening more and more and more. What's going on, you know? So that's how you have all these life coaches now booming the industry. And I'm a holistic confidence coach too, because I teach people how to optimize their health to the point where they won't get sick, how to optimize their finances to the point that they build enough cash flowing assets that they don't have to work if they don't want to. But people don't know these things because somehow they have taken things for granted in this country. Yes, there are lots of things that are fantastically arranged for you in this country, but that doesn't exempt you from working and building your life because it's always a do it yourself project. And
I
there are
think
more and
I
more
th-
having a very difficult time understanding that.
I think it's because of wanting everything now. It's the instant, like, need it now, instant gratification culture. I think that's what
Mhm.
it is,
Absolutely,
and it's
absolutely.
starting from a
It's
younger and younger age.
exactly that's true, and
Interesting.
it's very deceiving because if it's fast, it's not going to be quality, and everything in your life to be high quality is a lifelong project. Period.
And that translates to AI too, because we're talking about how it does everything for you. But just because it's fast doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. It doesn't mean you put any thought or effort into it. So that's interesting.
Exactly.
Even with
Hmm.
your tools, you still have to be conscious of what you're doing. Can you talk about the transition from music to nursing? Like, that's a pretty significant transition. So, and then going later into investing in writing. That's a big changes.
So I chose nursing because I was 32 years old when I understood I had to change my life. I had spent 11 years in college by that time. And then I started thinking, okay, so what is a profession that is so necessary that I'll find work anywhere in the world, but doesn't require another 11 years in college? So nursing was an excellent choice. And I had a couple of friends who had transitioned to nursing. I mean, one friend, and she inspired me a lot. She said, look, I did it with a child. You have no children. You can do it. You can do this. Just, you know. So she let me borrow her anatomy and physiology book. She already was an established nurse, but she kept her books. And I read that book 4 times from cover to cover before I even started the anatomy and physiology class. It took me 6
Wow.
months to read it from cover to cover because I had no scientific vocabulary in English whatsoever. And all
Wow.
this terminology I had to learn. So I started reading 9, 10 hours a day, just like I was used to practicing violin 9, 10 hours a day. So the violin practice went to 2 hours and then the reading boomed to 10 hours. So I could really understand what it was all about because I was determined to get it right in spite of
How do
my
you
complexes.
retain that? How do you retain all that information?
I read it multiple times. That's how you retain it
Wow.
because you read it first twice and then you read the textbook again and you retain. And I aced all of my exams in nursing school.
Damn.
Okay.
Wow.
And then came the practical knowledge and all that because I knew I was so behind scientifically. I was in my 30s. I didn't have the benefit of high school science and all that. So I knew that I had to step up my game significantly to be able to be at par with the young kids that were starting in nursing. Because they look at you
There
like your grandmother when you're in your 30s and they're 18, right? Um,
yeah, there
so
had to be some like transition point though where you like were like I can't do this anymore. Like was there like some kind of moment where you had like a breakdown where you needed to turn it all around?
there was a friend who informed me that so there were several of us who had the same teacher in Louisiana State University, Kibort Murdiursian, fantastic violin teacher who is now in Bloomington, Indiana. But one of these people informed me that two others had transitioned, one to finances and the other one was going to medical school to become a surgeon like his parents. These two people were so talented and successful that they nailed every audition they played for orchestras. So they were way ahead of me, even though they were 5 years younger than me. So when I heard over the phone in January of 2008 that these two guys had abandoned music, that was like a slap to the face. And that's
Whoa.
where I went down for a week and nothing made sense to me. And I said, I need to do something now because if I don't, I will have huge regrets in 30 years. And I've done this for 26 years by now, and it's horrible, but it needs to happen. It was bad. It was really, really bad.
That's interesting because we often say don't compare ourselves, but that's a moment where you had to do something because of that. You're like, if this person feels like that and I know I'm nowhere near that or something, like it's
Yeah.
interesting perspective.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was a wake-up call. You have to wake up at some point because you can't be in denial. That I could have made even more progress with the violin, but when you have so much bad history, mental history with a profession that hasn't gone the way you want it, you still have the chance to do something completely different, start from scratch and build it on your own terms and dump the BS mentality, change your mentality and really do it right. And I knew I had good memory. I knew I was going to study like a maniac because I have the work ethic. That was never a problem. Okay. And the other thing is, I had to move because I also I had went through a divorce at that same exact time. On top of that, so I moved into an apartment where I realized, okay, so there is a limit to noise when you're a violinist, but there is no limit to reading because reading doesn't make noises, right? So I came to understand I can read for 24 hours. I will never show up for an exam unprepared. And that's what really sets some kind of a comfort and confidence, beginning confidence that I can do anything to get to become a nurse and an excellent nurse and pass all the exams and everything because I knew how to study. Study was quiet. I just had to do it, and that was great.
So, what are signs that someone would need to look for if they were considering a change or they didn't know if they should change? Because that wasn't, that's just like a very circumstantial case, right? Like you got lucky and heard something, but how would somebody identify, like, I need to switch, I need to change?
You need to have a realistic understanding of what you can do and compare to the market. You need to understand market. You have to understand economics a little bit. You have to be interested in that, even if your field has nothing to do with this, because I knew that the orchestras were going underwater, and I was thinking maybe I should change, maybe not. But then when people who were better than me started changing, then that was really like a total, okay, what are you waiting for? You really need to do something now. Um, it was not luck, I don't think. Um, it was just the desire to wake up and just grab onto that piece of information to know that I was right about needing to change and I couldn't beat around the bush anymore. But there were many, many signs before that, Joseph, that I just comfortably, conveniently decided to kind of, put in the back of my head and say, no, I'm going to keep practicing. But it digs you deeper into a hole because you've been there for 26 years. It's improving, but not nearly as fast as it should, because the older you get, the more you run out of time. And then these orchestras started disappearing, bankrupting, downsizing. You're auditioning for one spot against 40 to 500 people. And what are your chances? And aren't there other professions that are actually needed? And people got to understand when they're younger, right? If there is a shortage somewhere, that means it's a tough profession. Lots of people don't want to do it. But that is the sign that you shouldn't shy away from it. Get into it and see why they don't want to do it. Could you do it and be employed for the entire life? Or that's just so simple and nobody thinks about it. Everybody wants to go where everybody else goes. Just stupid, right? That's no sense of economics whatsoever. But if you see a shortage, find out why there is a shortage. If you want to do stuff that others don't want to do, you will be needed, you will be appreciated, you will be sought after, you will never be poor. And I didn't know this at the time. But as the years went through, and then when I started reading about investing, the aha moment came, said, oh, so if you do more things that other people don't want to do, legally, ethically, and morally, you'll be good. And the longer you do that, the better you will be.
I have like a few different thoughts here. Wow, I don't know if I should go back or forward. So I'm just going to go forward and then I'll come back to it. So thriving in diverse fields, what advice do you have for creatives struggling to find their path and considering a career pivot? I mean, that's basically what you answered, but for creatives specifically. And the reason I'm asking is because most times they're told follow their passion, right?
Yes, but you really need to be very sure what your passion is. Because sometimes you're creating a passion model based on somebody else's suggestions or expectations of you. And this is the problem with 95% of society. Because what you think is your passion may not at all be your passion. It's just what's been expected of you. Or because you thought it was trendy and cutesy and nice and you told everybody that was going to be your passion. Now how do you back off when you really see that it's not working out? Okay. If you're not born to do it, but you absolutely want to do it, then you better be ready to work your butt off to get what you want with that so-called passion of yours. Okay. You have to understand your competition and be willing to be either different or much better than them. All right. And you have to be adaptable because you will be surprised how resourceful your mind is. You can find many, many more passions than you think. But people are lazy. They don't want to explore themselves, let alone other opportunities. And that's where the problem becomes. But because if there's anything that most people hate the most is think for themselves. So they get ideas from places and from somewhere. And it doesn't work out very well. And then they wonder why they're miserable. But exploring yourself in the first place, that is a very creative process, but you have to have the integrity. And if you want to be in creative arts and creative fields, you can be creative in any profession. That's what's interesting about every profession. I don't care what trade you put your hands into or what scientific profession or art profession, but you can be creative all the time because every work to be done well requires for you to be able to solve problems effectively and very well and compassionately. And that's everything about creativity on top of your knowledge and competence level.
You're basically saying you can apply it to other ways, right? You don't have to just restrict yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm still kind of stuck on your quote that you said that once you notice people that maybe you look up to or people better than you, that they changed, that's when you knew you had to change. And I thought that's the quote of the day right there. Super inspiring. How do you balance the artistic sensitivity often found in creatives with the resilience needed to face the business world?
You need resilience everywhere. I just didn't have it before. But the creativity with resilience is that basically you have to be creative with your own mindset, because you're always the one that's the most likely to get off the leash from your own attention. Before you can control anything around you, you have to control your own mind and mindset. And once you have this in place, you have your own ways to convince yourself that you should do these 5 tasks to get to the 6th result. That is a major milestone to the actual dream that you're having, step by step, always having the clear perspective of your ultimate insane goal. That once the closer you get to it, the less insane it seems. So then you create more goals. That is also a big part of creativity and mindset. Okay. But you have to challenge yourself. You have to keep on your toes at all times, because things are changing very rapidly in this century. And we will get obsolete and old
That's
the
fair.
second we stop challenging ourselves and learning new things. So that's where you don't even need to make an effort to be creative anymore, because there is just so much to learn that anywhere you turn, you can reinvent yourself if you want to. But it's always best to be in some kind of a context, right? Because each recreation serves a purpose of your bigger self. So you need to stay relevant, not just to yourself, but to everybody else, and try your best to truly nourish the people around you, because they need all sorts of encouragement, because all of us are intimidated in different ways by the changes and the insecurity that's around us right now, and especially in the last 2-3 years with the pandemic. It just amplified multiple times the basic sense of insecurity with the fast changes. It just became nightmare. And you see with the levels of anxiety with people and depression that has grown, and especially in the younger ones, it's mind-boggling. Instead of seeing it as an opportunity, and it is an opportunity in many ways, but you need to be willing to change a mindset here and there to see the opportunity rather than the doom coming.
That's good. I like that one. Financial management and the theme of your work. Why do you think financial literacy is often a challenge for creatives? I often face this problem too, so I'm just curious how you face it, because being organized is a big problem for creatives.
Mm-hmm. So, financial management, discipline, discipline, and specific clear goals. Okay. Depending on your goals, that's how you realize how much money you need in order to complete your goals. But it's not a one time, one life event when you earn the sum of money, then you're set. You need to know how to create cash flow for the rest of your life. Okay. So people confuse career with finances. They're very separate fields, because career is your way to be useful to society and your way
Wow.
to learn and acquire
Never heard that.
marketable skills so that you can be appreciated, wanted, needed, looked for help in your expertise, and that you always have employment or some source of money, whether it's through your employer or through your own business or both, like it's in my case. I like having both, because it's good to know how to work for somebody, and it's good to know how to be your own boss and convince others to work for you. Both are invaluable skills. So I tell people, try both, do both, because you have both perspectives and you're in control. Then finances, your wealth building is what you do with the money that you earned to make it grow and cash flow, regardless of whether you have a job or a business. So these are two separate fields, right? And two separate mindsets. So this is where you need a plan. You need a goal, you need a plan, you need multiple goals. 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, if you're really smart, okay? And the long-term goals is what the really successful people financially start with first, because your long-term goal will determine all the other smaller goals. And many people, because they're afraid of the terminology, they're afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow, they're afraid of failure, they're afraid to take risks, they don't put big goals to win in front of themselves. So they always have a very small picture. If you have a small picture, you have small achievements. Okay? You got to build the big picture, then you break it into the small picture, but every small piece is part of the big picture. And then you have to pursue that to the end for consistency, for mind discipline, and to actually see results. I mean, imagine growing a tree. You start a baby tree, it takes years until it starts producing fruit, right? And the fruit is what you're after. But the same is with the financial tree that you build. You first need to learn, then you have to experiment, then you have to fail miserably several times, preferably earlier rather than later. Then you have to recover, then you learn how to regrow your business, and then you see cash flow fruit consistently. And that's when you know what you're doing. Okay?
And I think
Just like
it's super important, right? Because artists, as we're talking, like, we know they don't have funds, they're not good with money to begin with, but at the same time, if we had more successful artists in society, can you talk about what the implications of that would be, like how artists are different as entrepreneurs?
artists need to develop financial knowledge and stop thinking that their skill is beyond financial knowledge and that financial discipline is something that should be lauded at all. Because, see, my parents, I told them, it's not a secret, they know I think they're financial invalids. And they always accuse me that I eternalized them in the chapter 10 of my book when I described their awful financial experiences, the mistakes I learned from. But because they always say, oh, money is not important. See, that's the concept of the very intelligent intellectual, money I'm beyond money, I'm too educated, I'm way too smart for it. Well, no, you're not, because you're constantly depending on other people to give you money to sustain your art. Clearly, you should learn something about money, because your
Mm-hmm.
art should not be dependent on the mercy of others. Just like my orchestra bankrupted Syracuse Symphony because the rich people suddenly decided they didn't need an orchestra.
Because
And we
that's
had
how you get
families.
exploited, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't depend on that. It's awful, because your art deserves to exist if you can sustain it. But nobody's obligated to support you as an artist.
Wow,
Okay, and
that's a
that's
good one.
was big wake-up call for me when the orchestra bankrupted. I mean, I was fortunate to have a job in the ICU waiting for me upon graduation, because we crashed in April of 2011. In May, I graduated and I had the job waiting for me. But there were families in this orchestra. They lost both incomes. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, and then
It's
they
huge.
blame the community that, oh, they don't support us, they do this, they that. Well, the problem with New York, Syracuse, New York, I mean, New York has the biggest taxes in the whole country. Very corrupt system. So most of the major businesses left New York. And when you don't have major businesses with employment and everything, the culture deteriorates, because there is nobody to support an orchestra. When you don't have good employment, people aren't going to spend money on an orchestra and salaries. So it's just that simple. But if these musicians had learned to invest their savings, a couple of them had real estate, but two people. Everybody else had no investments, no assets, or they lost it all in the stock market where they shouldn't have been to begin with. Okay, in 2008. So
Yeah.
financial knowledge is important for everybody. I don't care how elevated you think you are as an artist. The reality proves you wrong, unfortunately.
Yeah, whenever you're still not where you want to be at the end of the day, it usually comes down to people didn't know about you because you didn't have enough money. So yeah, money is a pretty big factor, right?
Yeah, it gives us
That's
choices. It really gives us choices. It's not everything in life at all, but it's
for
good to
sure.
have choices. And ultimately, the biggest golden mine is your mind and your mindset that it produces. That's the real money. Okay. It's not the material papers or your assets or anything. It's how well can you react to any situation and still be in control. That's the real wealth in a human being.
Wow. I was going to ask you at the end of the show what it means to be more than rich, but I feel like you just answered it. That's good.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
that's
More than
good.
rich, you have to be resourceful. You are your own golden chest, golden box, everything. It's you. You know
And
what to do.
let me double down on that, because one of the things that I used to tell my friends, like, even if you had all the money in the world, at the end of the day, what do you want to do? Because a lot of people
Exactly.
don't know what they want to do anyway. Even if they had all the resources, how would you do it? What's the first step? Like, there's not motivation beyond I need this, and then it's an excuse for not doing it. It's interesting.
Absolutely, because you see, in this country, in the United States, people have so much resource at their fingertips right now. You
Hmm.
can work from home, and they're still highly unmotivated and depressed people. It's amazing. I mean, people centuries ago had much less resources, and they were so much more creative, and because circumstances, scarcity prompted them to be creative and solve problems. Now everything is solved for you, like the basic necessities are beyond solved in this country. And you have people depressed taking pills for anxiety. Are you kidding me? You got to turn
Yeah.
your anxiety into a motivating factor. See, that was my thinking in 2008. I developed deliberately a huge fear of poverty, Joseph. I decided I was going to be anxious about poverty and make my anxiety kick my ass every hour of the day to do my best. And it was not easy at all. It took 5 years to reverse my mindset. But you have to start from somewhere. You just have to start from somewhere and have a purpose in your life and sometimes it takes a while to find your purpose, and that's okay. But you have to work on yourself constantly,
You
even
also
with the
made me
resource.
think that it'll be exacerbated a little bit with AI too, as we're talking about like people not having purpose and meaning, right? It'll probably get rid of the simpler jobs and people are going to be upset about that. And it's like we need to find even more so things that are, I think one of the things you elaborated on is if you're going to be doing things to enhance yourself, that you also need to be doing it for your community and the people around you, like your family. Because now more than ever, that's super important to not just have to take care of yourself or a skill that's not just valuable for you.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the huge problems with AI and the internet in general is that people stop reading books. They, on
Mm,
mass scale, they stop reading books. They like these short texts, very short attention spans, shorter and shorter and shorter. They have no patience for everything, just like you said
yeah.
with the fast food mentality.
Hmm.
If you don't have the patience to learn things in depth, nothing in your life will be right and finished
I
and
definitely,
solid and, you know.
I'm guilty there too. I feel the same. I mean, I have tons of books and I guilt myself. I'm like, why? I'll flip to one page and I'll get stuck on one page and I'm like, I need to read this whole thing. Why am I not read this whole thing? You know?
It's a challenge
Yeah.
nowadays. It's a big challenge, and it's not your fault. It's a collective sense of we have to be more responsible with our own brains
In our time
because
though.
we're bombarded with information.
Hmm.
So how do you sort through all this, right? This is why you need the goals and beyond that.
That's fair. Um, so going into holistic approach to life and success, your holistic approach, which is like health, career, finances, relationships, how can creatives specifically apply this model to balance their personal and professional lives?
Well, again, it all boils down to what you want to accomplish because you craft your own relationship choices. You select your relationships based on your health choices, your financial choices, and your spiritual choices, right? Um, Health-wise, you you really want to stay away from the healthcare system. And I'm telling you this very responsibly as a nurse of 13 years now. Okay, so you
Wow.
need to optimize your health to the maximum. In my case, I have to serve as a 100% example to my patients. So I am a whole foods organic vegan, no compromises, no excuses, fitness freak, and I detox every day. So you optimize your health so you don't have to worry about your time being wasted and your money being wasted into hospitals, hospital bills, health bills, and that sort of anxiety. So your finances, we already talked about that. Your relationships are very largely shaped based on your financial and health choices. So be very careful who you get influenced by and whose example you follow. All right. So you need to surround yourself with people who, at least if they can't teach you these things, at least they're not in your way. Because many times the relationships are in the way of our progress. And we have to know to establish boundaries and limits and truly utilize our times to the best because we think we have time, but we don't. And the creatives, it's very hard because when you're in a creative niche, usually your world is very limited with people who are like you, and
Hmm.
you have to be political. You have to accommodate. You can say no many times. And I found this to be a huge problem when I was a violinist. But I also know of wise musicians who have gone around that problem. I mean, for one thing, I once watched an interview with the amazing violinist Hilary Hahn, who was in her studio before a concert, and the host of the interview asked her, "Hilary, what is the smell here?" She said, "Well, I'm making my soup." He was like, "What? I'm cooking my soup. I have carrots and cabbage and potatoes. I always make my own soup." He was like, "Why are you making your own soup?" And she said, "Look, I like clean food. Wouldn't you like to know what you're eating?" He was like, Yeah, but see, that type of thing, she doesn't eat the stuff that everybody else eats. She wants to be healthy, her own, even with her insanely busy schedule, because to be Hillary Hahn, she concertizes all the time and records. And even she has been able to integrate her understanding of good health into her career, in spite of the demands of going to parties, cocktails, and all sorts of events before and after
and
concerts.
and in spite of having the money to eat wherever you want, whenever you want, right? You're talking
Absolutely,
about controlling
she knows
discipline.
exactly, because she knows that restaurant food is highly unhealthy and she wants to stay healthy, right? And I was astounded. That was maybe the only musician I knew that was doing that and of such a caliber. And like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it, right? So you take the best of the great people and integrate it in your own lifestyle.
I feel like that about
But
musicians too, right? Like we all have our favorite artists, musicians, and we mimic their styles and then make it our own the same. So same with life and patterns, habits, is what you're getting at.
yes, but your role models are very important, right? I mean, I don't personally know Hillary Hahn, but a little snippet of an interview, you see that, oh, look what they're doing. Can I do this? Every time you can learn something from somebody, even if you don't mimic their entire lifestyle, obviously you can do that, but you can be very creative with your own lifestyle. And people don't do that because, like I said, they don't like thinking for themselves, so they just follow a current that is not always, it's kind of inertia. So
So true.
we can follow inertia that's not creative. While they think they're focusing on their creative aspect, but your entire life is creativity. You can't
Hmm.
isolate your art and work from your health, relationships, and wealth. They are very connected. And if you don't see the connection, you have gaps and you won't be fulfilled. At least my experience has showed me that
That's a pretty good
for
way
me.
to summarize that. I like that. Coming back to like how from when you moved from Bulgaria to the United States, you succeeded in various fields, but how's the experience with the cultural integration influenced like just your overall philosophy on your personal and professional growth? Has it changed? Do you feel different?
Yes, it has, because I need to learn communication. I had to improve my English for one thing. But communication was important because, not so much when I came as a music student, because when you play with other musicians, you guys don't really talk except for in rehearsals. But then when the profession changed, that was a huge challenge. Much more communication, conversations with people with different professions. So that cultural integration was hard. On top of the fact that you also communicate with people from very different cultures, not just with Americans. Although the Americans are the important part at the beginning of the career, because most of your bosses, managers are Americans. Then you meet other people. But to me, it was really communication, patience, and understanding of the other sides. It's not personal, but it's cultural. That was very, very difficult. And like I said before, the complaining part, that whole blaming victim mentality, which I had for over 2 decades, I had to combat that. That was very, very hard for me to do. Very hard
That's
to
that's
do.
a
Like I said, 5, 6 years to reverse because it was so deep.
that's a good segue into this next question because it kind of ties into it. You can kind of continue, but in terms of like cultural understanding, your adaptability, how does that play a role in achieving self-confidence and success? Like we're talking about integration.
Because when you communicate well with people and you stop feeling entitled and victimized, it's easier to make others cooperate with your desires and do the things that you need them to do in order to help you, right? And you do the same for them. But like any business I talk to, in order for my own businesses, any reparations, and you have to know how to communicate with the people whom you want to help you, so that they're more willing to help because they have tons of other people who ask them the same thing. So if you are somebody who needs somebody for something, there are 300 other people who do the same thing to that person. So how do you help them prioritize on you for this little chunk of time when you need your thing done? In school is the same thing. The attention of a teacher, the attention of some classmate who is better than you to help in something, or a tutor. Every time communication is so crucial, and of course you have to give back with the communication as they need. You have to capture their needs, how they want to be treated, how you can make their work easier so they can help you better. That is a very important aspect culturally, I think. And people appreciate it if you do it well, but it was a very lengthy process because it's very easy for us to communicate our needs and demands, but we don't try to understand the needs of the person whom we need to help us because they need our help just as much as we need theirs for them to do their job well, to make our life easier. And that was a big learning curve for me in this
That's a
country.
super good point. I think a lot of people don't ever think about how can I get on this person's good side or be valuable or provide something that they need before I go asking for something. Like a lot of people do just ask and expect, especially in America,
Yeah.
right? Interesting. Um, pathways to becoming who you need to be. So in your journey, uh, have you identified or pursued like the pathways to become the person you need, like that you actually wanted to be or needed to be? Like, can you guide the listeners on discovering, following their own paths?
Yeah. So you mean from my perspective, my
Yeah,
pathways, how I
yeah.
discovered those? Well, for one thing, I wanted to be resourceful and confident. I wanted to get to a point in my life where I didn't care what anybody thought about me, but not because I'm a jerk, but because I know what I'm doing. Okay. So other people's opinions are not my business. But to get there, again, I had to build the competence. I had to produce some results for myself and for others to see. So that's how you earn respect, with integrity and with following through with your commitments. Okay. And you don't compromise. If you want to really lead by example, you don't compromise, because you compromise twice. Once you're going to compromise 10, 15, 17 times, you ruin your integrity. So confidence, control over all of my life aspects. That was a very important part of my pathway, because I hate feeling obligated to people. And this stems from a previous mental trauma in my childhood. It's when I would upset people in my country, they would say, you don't deserve success because you're such and such and such. So you grow with the notion that if you don't do certain things, you don't deserve to succeed. And even if you have succeeded, if you stop doing the bad things, that thing that you don't deserve still eats your mind. So
Wow.
I had to get rid of that so I could make any progress with my life. But first of all, you have to accept yourself for who you are at the moment, right? And then you see how you can improve on the things that you want to improve without bashing yourself and demotivating yourself and degrading yourself all the time. Self-respect. Self-respect. That's why I became a martial artist. When I drew that pathway that I wanted to be confident, I became a martial artist, which was a dream of mine since the third grade, but my dad didn't allow it at all because I was a little violinist and there was no way I was going to be a martial artist, right? So that came up very late in my life, and I accomplished, and I got my black belt and all that. Um, you just create a beautiful image of yourself per your own perception. What does this person have, what they don't have? What do I have right now? And how can I achieve what I want to be per my ideal understanding of myself? And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do. And it's very creative, that image that you can create of yourself. And it's sad when you see people who don't even dare to think big about themselves in terms of personality and resilient qualities and self-respect and ability to solve anything for themselves and for others. We're incredibly resourceful creatures. Our bodies can naturally heal. They have the
That's
tendency to heal in our minds too. We just don't know that.
no, that's actually a good segue. So do you have any like tips or advice for people who may be dealing with self-doubt, creative specifically?
Yes, I can tell you what helped me very much. I read the books of extremely successful people who were not successful before they became successful, and they
Hmm.
struggled with multiple problems that were sometimes similar to mine, other times completely different from mine. And the moment when I realized that it didn't matter how different their problems were from mine, I couldn't use my unique situation as an excuse not to try, just
Wow.
because their
Love it.
situations were different. That was the breakthrough. And that's what you can do, people who are unconfident. And you will not be confident with any new thing that you start. And it's okay. It's okay. You have to be prepared to fail, because failure is a teacher. Okay. But my book is the same way. I mean, I said in the first chapter, I think it was, when I said, your unique situation is not an excuse for you not to try. Study from my experience, read other people's experiences, listen to their interviews, Okay, meet with them, buy mentorship. Why not? Get informed. I mean, I got mentorship before I became a real estate investor. I had no clue about real estate. I bought mentorship from Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, because I purchased his real estate course, and because I invested the money, I had to go and take the action, right? So
I'm
free is
curious
great.
though, on like I guess the only way I could push back though is like what would be the opposite of that? Like, do you get what I'm asking? Like,
No,
because we're talking about self-doubt, right? Um, I wish I can go back to your quote right now. You basically said in a few sentences. I'm trying to summarize it.
don't
Uh,
use other different your unique situation as an excuse not to try.
that's what I was going to say, is because you're technically saying you would have to compare yourself, and that's my only pushback. Is I usually tell people don't compare yourself, but essentially that's what you do to realize we're not so different. I can't make excuses
But
anymore.
it's a subconscious process to our comparison because we need points of reference at all times. Ultimately, we compare ourselves to ourselves. Compare yourself today to where you were yesterday and the day before yesterday. Okay. But you have to grow the motivation for that. And once you have a little bit of that experience, when you see good reference points, then you really develop the confidence to just compare yourself with yourself enough to be your best,
Mm.
worst rival. Okay. Your most aggressive rival. That's when you
So
become
you're just
successful.
comparing yourself to your last version of you, right? Like how I'm better is what you're.
In the last 5 years, I have been able to do that. But before, I compared myself to others because I was less confident. And uh,
That's a big one too. If you think about our youth, right? Like that's constant. That's one of the things that we can repeat as much as we can, and it's really hard to get that across no matter what.
it is very hard. I just think it requires some experience and for people to see for themselves that they are able to do that. But it's always helpful when somebody reinforces your success so you can become a little more really not you're on your feet, not like an attention
Yeah,
craving thing, but once you get rid of the preconceptions of yourself, then you crave less and less attention and approval from others.
that's a
But
good
that
one.
comes with the ability to solve problems.
Do you have any examples of somebody like encouraging you or like telling you like one specific line where you're like, oh wow, I thought now I'm thinking differently and now I'm on a whole different path because you supported me or you did something that I didn't consider?
Yeah, see, I was very fortunate. My parents at first they didn't want me to become a nurse, right? But then they started supporting me and said, "Listen, if you did this, you can do this and this and this." So that was very supportive because you compare, you overcame something, then you can do something else and else. But the point is, uh, who was that? I think it was. Who did I read? Well, Napoleon Hill has been a great influence. His books, and then I listened to Earl Nightingale and some other people here in my circle, like
Ah,
colleagues. Several people who said it's nice to achieve things one after the other, but you have to constantly demand more of yourself. Not because society demands it, but because you want to demand it. You become a high performance individual, right? High performance person. You need to keep demanding of yourself. And if you do that, you will find the people who encourage you because when they see a genuine intent in you to keep developing yourself and growing as a person, there is always somebody who will say, yes, you can do this. This was a problem I faced several years ago. That's how I solved it. And you truly should compare yourself to those who are better than you, only to motivate yourself, not to degrade yourself. And you should compare to those who are much worse than you, not to just sit into complacency, but to say, I'm better because I did that and I didn't do that. And I need to continue because I don't want to be like these people. And if I stay complacent and I relax into my current comfort zone, I'll become like them. And that's not a good idea. Mhm.
it seems like a lot of your decisions were coordinated, right? Like you made plans and you stuck to them. But do you have any examples of where you jumped into things and you didn't know how it was going to turn out, and maybe you found your passion or what you loved in the process? Because you can't plan everything.
Correct. Well, so nursing was one thing. I took the risk to study, knowing that I may not like the profession. But I was afraid of poverty. Remember, I created the fear
Mm-hmm.
of poverty, so I said I'm gonna do it no matter what because I need the discipline, I need the skill, I need the knowledge, I need the money. But along the way, many things I liked about the profession. I hate the system and the paperwork, of course, but working with the patients is amazing. Okay.
Mhm.
And then with real estate, it was the same. I knew I was getting into a big, big, big deal. Buying real estate properties and renting them, dealing with tenants, which can be like patients or worse, and learning to budget and extreme financial discipline. Because once you have a building like a building with 4 apartments, you're responsible for fixing everything. So you don't have just one
Mhm.
problem, you have a quadruple problem because there are 4 apartments in the building.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. Okay, do I gonna like it? Am I not gonna like it? I'm gonna make myself like it. And the first several years was very tough because you need to make the property cash flow, but there are lots of things to fix that the previous landlord didn't fix because he was treating the tenants like dogs. But these are the types of properties that you buy as a beginning investor because you need it with many problems, so you can actually affordably buy it. Then you invest in the property to raise the value and make your tenants and residents appreciate it and stay for you. But it's not a quick process. And that's where many
Mhm.
investors fail because they expect these quick results. Okay, you're going to like it once you see the results from your work and dedication.
Ah,
Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Okay, so that's how you
that's
make
true.
yourself like things, right? Yeah. And then you're surprised how many things you can actually like that you didn't think you could like before.
Can you talk about navigating the process of self-discovery, like what role it's played in shaping your identity?
Um, I mean, everything, navigating the process. I have done this through work because nothing has come easily for me in my life, ever. I'm by no means the most talented person in anything. I'm not a fast learner. I'm your typical late life starter because I woke up at 32, which is called an early midlife crisis. However, as far as professional development was extremely late because by 32, I had practiced the violin 26 years. And when somebody has been in a trade for 26 years, they think of retirement. They don't think about starting a new career, right? But the navigating is through with the self-discovery. You really, I mean, I don't know how to say that, but it is all through the willingness to do the work and solve what you need to solve. For at least that's how it has been for me because I was one who always ran away from problems. I couldn't imagine myself solve anything other than the violin. And once you understand that you can solve much more, and you should, but not run away from problems and face them. And that's how you discover yourself, through your resourcefulness and through your resilience. Otherwise, there is no self discovery. You're hiding from yourself and from everything else. You think you're hiding from the problems, but you're actually hiding from your own ability to live a full life. And it's a sad existence to do that. I know it because I did it for more than 20 years, and I don't recommend it to anybody.
That's good. Uh, in terms of like the importance of prioritization, I know you talk about that, like importance of that. Can you discuss the psychological aspects of why we cling to certain habits or beliefs that don't serve us? How do we let them go?
That it all depends on our conviction of how strongly we want the things that will make us happy and prosperous and everything. But you have to clean the room for them first by removing certain people from your life, by unlearning certain habits physically and mentally and emotionally. You have to unlearn these habits, ditch them. That's how you clean a lot of room. That includes with your health, with your finances, with your career, how you treat your job on a daily basis, how you treat your health on a daily basis, how you treat your wealth on a daily basis. So there are habits that you need to remove in every aspect of your life in order to clear room and time to substitute those bad things with the good things that you want. So you need to sort out. If you want specific examples, I can give you in every aspect of life because you need to get rid of bad spending habits, for one thing, bad health habits in terms of nutrition, lack of exercise, eating bad nutrition, not detoxing your body every day from toxins. So that also has to do with time management, how you prioritize your time. Who are you seeing? Are you seeing people drinking coffee for 2 hours every day? Stop that because you won't have time for the things that you actually need and that will benefit you in the long term. So it's a whole conglomeration of connected responsibilities that you need to develop in your life to be in control of every aspect of your life. And that takes some time to figure out.
What do you think are like the root causes of laziness or procrastination, specifically among creatives, and how do they overcome these barriers?
Well, for one thing, the lack of ideas can be very difficult. Many have the mistake, make the mistake of thinking that ideas just pop to you, but ideas also need to be worked on. Ideas need to be worked on. They come from certain experiences. If you're lazy, you don't experience enough of your life, you won't have too many ideas to grasp and relate to the world. Okay, so you need to be willing to make your hands dirty, get yourself dirty in some ways to like do certain things that you didn't expect you would do legally, ethically, and morally, of course. But when you're lazy and you don't expose yourself to real life and real people in real situations, you won't have too many creative ideas. The best artists have really come from very problematic areas of the world. They have experienced a lot of sadness, a lot of regrets, a lot of disappointments, whether inwardly and outwardly, but a lot of great ideas have been born from suffering. And there are many people who refuse to suffer nowadays. And that's also a form of laziness. It doesn't help you with creativity very much, because if you're a super, super happy person, everybody cannot be very happy and be very creative. It has never worked that way. Okay. And I know that my creativity suffered from the fact that I wanted to just practice in the practice room for 9 hours a day and not go into the community and do some work with my hands, help somebody, learn, hear somebody's experience, a story if you want. It's different from the practice room. This idea that you have to completely focus on your art without experiencing the outer world. It's a big mistake, but many of us were trained that way. Oh, you have to practice, 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 practice. And then you have all these musicians that are like robots. They haven't experienced life in any way because they were practicing all the time. So you need to go in the outside world, have the time to, I don't know what you want to experience. I mean, life offers different things, but in different people and different opportunities. But many of the creative people don't see opportunity. But that's just not just in the creative world. That's anywhere. Because you still have to challenge yourself to think and be curious about what's going on. And then lots of creative ideas can come. Um, it's very hard to explain, but you can't just focus on your creativity without connecting yourself to the world.
It's interesting because I feel like I listen to the same songs, the same artists. It's really hard for me to get like a new favorite anything. And then on top of that, at the same time, I don't really like outside influences. Like I really like to be as original as possible and think, even though I'm sure I'm been influenced and have influences, I like to think that I don't have any external influence because it's all original coming from my head and I don't listen to music as much, you know? I don't know if that's really true, but I feel like
No,
that. It's a weird paradox.
no, because if you actually follow the music development from the 16th through the 20th century in Western music, you will see that all the big masters of music were derived from the previous big masters, yet were able to add enough uniqueness to their work to become their own unique, amazing masters. But it's all
Wow.
derivative, and it's fascinating how derivative it is. I mean, for instance, there is one sonata by Domenico Scarlatti where I detect a moment which is completely almost the same, like the song Lady Madonna by the Beatles. And I'm like, well, that's
Wow.
interesting. Because I swear in this particular 10-second segment of this sonata, I'm
Same
hearing to Lady
notes or
Madonna.
something? Wow.
It's the same concession of the bass line and the actual rhythm of the piece. And one was written in the uh, 18th century and Beatles were in the 20th century, completely different type of music, but the same darn succession. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting, right? So they could have heard this either from the sonata from Scarlatti or a completely different piece that was derivative from that same sonata, okay?
Hmm.
Because Scarlatti was incredibly diverse composer. He just encyclopedic in his 555 keyboard sonatas. So he created a base for lots of ideas after him. Okay, but it's the same with like Beethoven, who studied from the older German masters and Italian masters before him. His music in places is derivative, but it's still extremely uniquely his because of the way who he was and the complete dynamics revolution that he introduced through his music. But it's still based on the masters before him. It's fascinating. So
It
when you're
sounds
creating, yeah, you're still influenced by, but the trick is to take the best influence and make it yours. And it is possible, but you have to be aware of what's going on around you, because otherwise you think you're original, but not necessarily. Something was written 100 years ago and sounded like you. Well, they were first. Sorry. Right?
yeah, it
So
sounds like what you're getting at is there's nothing new under the sun, right?
yes and no, though, because it's all a matter of interpretation. You always put it through the prism of the newer person experience. So it does become new. It does become new, even to those who know the previous example, right? Like I told you, when I
Interesting.
heard a piece from 200, 300 years before, this modern song by the Beatles, it was not the same. It's very different, but like a flashlight, like a deja vu. This is the
Yeah.
moment, but they're
You're like,
completely
I heard this
different.
before. Where did this come from? That kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Interesting.
It's just amazing how, yeah. And I can give you many other examples like that, but creativity is amazing because you can still be very unique in yourself, but you have to be aware of what is, because all the great masters, they studied from the previous masters. They
How do
were
you find your
very tuned to what was before them.
how do you find yourself using creativity to solve problems? Because oftentimes that's the best use of it, right?
Yes. I use points of reference with previous successes. Could be a completely different situation, but I'm going to twist the previous situation in my mind to make it work for the current situation, and I'll add some new elements to it. And I always want to ask the source of the problem, if it's a human being, how to best fit their criteria so we can mutually benefit from the solution of the problem. Because problems are usually caused by people. 95% of the time, you have to deal with people to solve problems. And that's your answer right there. But you have to be willing to listen. And sometimes you have to be willing to listen a lot. Okay. And you need to set the limits and make things truthful so you can actually solve the problem to the best of your ability and to the best benefit to both parties. Creativity is huge in solving problems, but it has to be truthful creativity, okay, with integrity. You don't beat around the bush and make things up, if you know what I'm saying.
No, for sure.
Adaptability and creativity are very close sisters, I would say.
Do you have an approach to like lifelong learning?
Yes, I do. You always follow the newest trends with anything that you are interested in per your work, business, and then you have to also challenge your mind. I have a whole chapter on lifelong learning in the book. It's chapter 13. There are several ways to induce lifelong learning in your life. For one thing, you need to always introduce your brain to challenging things that are new to it, so it can stay very vigilant and flexible and able to quickly adapt to new things and understand new things. That really trains the brain very well. I call lifelong learning the brain fitness, the fitness for the mind, whereas meditation and inspiration are the detox and the nourishment of the mind, nutrition and detox of the mind. But lifelong learning is the fitness of the mind. So you always have to strive to exercise your mind in ways that are uncomfortable for the mind, so it can twist and mold itself in ways that it didn't do it before. You can still use older forms of reference, but you have to challenge your brain every day. And that's lifelong learning, no matter what it is, preferably in the context of your current interests so you can save the time. But I also like to dedicate at least an hour a day to things that I haven't done before, that are not necessarily relevant to what I'm doing right now, but make my brain uncomfortable and to revolt so that it can learn more even if it doesn't want to. I make it do that. The mind can be very resentful. So
Do you have any like predictions on how you think AI will impact the creative industry?
I don't have anything optimistic to tell you about that, because I
Oh
think that
no.
many I think many people will fall into the old pattern of indulging their laziness to think for themselves, and there will be many, many people who really will be unoriginal and very disappointed from AI. And that is my prediction. I already see it. And I think when you read like LinkedIn posts or any longer text or articles, you can tell whether they're AI generated or not. You know that the person who generated them didn't even proofread. So that's
Mhm.
catastrophic as far as education and literacy and overall cultural level. I think it's not going to be a good thing at all. And then AI, of course, you have a lot of manipulation going on. They can twist the truth in many ways and make it believable. So we need to develop even more critical thinking. But critical thinking comes with knowledge and experience. And if people don't want to experience and they are lazy to acquire new knowledge every day, they will be manipulated by AI. That's why I have a very pessimistic prediction about that
Darn.
in general.
I mean, I'm kind of with you on that. I hope I'm wrong though. Uh, do you see it enhancing the creative process at all? And what about like in context of self-confidence and personal development? Is there any positives there?
Um, I think it could enhance the creative process if you see something generated by AI that is really, really nice, and for you to strive to create something better than that. So
That's
it
a
will
good
teach
one.
you to work in a different way. Okay, so that's how it can enhance the creative process, because when you see an AI generated piece, you say, okay, so this has been generated by artificial intelligence and it's really awesome. So I have to do better than that because I'm the human being. I have the emotion, I have the feeling and everything. I should be able to do better than that, but that will involve more work, right? Because when you have
Hmm.
the job already done for you, it's very tempting to not do much work to make it better or to make yourself better, to do other pieces of work that are different from the AI. And this is difficult, Joseph, because the literacy of the current generations is so low that for them to surpass the AI is going to be a growing challenge, because people don't
Uh,
study the way we used to study when we were growing up, I think, or the previous generations,
no,
like
it's
our
true.
parents and
Absolutely
grandparents. They were
true.
they were just hungry to study and be literate and to know things. And today that's not the case. And I think AI is going to beat the people. They're going to whoop them because they just don't have the capacity, the discipline to outsmart it. I think that's a big problem.
In your book, you emphasize growth and learning. How can creatives maintain and sustain growth in their careers, especially in the fast evolving landscape of art and technology?
You just never settle with what you have achieved. You have to always strive for more, and different and better, per your own ability. Um, but you can become repetitive. You have to always be aware of your competition, or your peers at least. You just need to be very, very attuned to your market and never fall asleep behind the wheel, because the market evolves just as fast as technology does. And the demand, supply demand, that changes periodically. And to stay afloat, you have to be very knowledgeable and willing to put a lot of effort into it. It's going to be a
Um,
very hard work ahead of us.
I believe that too. What are like some common misconceptions you feel like you encounter about achieving holistic success?
Well, most people, when they hear the word holistic, they think mostly in terms of physical, mental, and emotional health. Whereas holistic involves the other aspects of life too, because you can't ditch your finances and relationships and spirituality for the sake of your health. It doesn't work that way.
I didn't think about
So
that.
it's an oversimplification of the concept of holistic, which is how I know that I am on a different path. Well, of course, Tony Robbins is before me,
So,
because
so
Tony
it's
Robbins
like an
and many other.
all-encompassing
Yes.
term is what you're saying.
Tony Robbins, he's a financial expert. He's an absolute extreme athlete. He eats ridiculously healthy. I mean, he's 60 something years old and he looks 40. Okay, so
Wow,
of course
I
there
didn't
are
know
many
that.
besides him who have done what I do, but we are a minority. We're still a minority because people like to be very narrowly specialized. They don't appreciate the value of developing and elevating all of your life aspects at the same time as demanding us everything else to be holistic. You're limited if you neglect aspects of your life. You're not holistic, you're not whole. I mean, you could be happy, but you're kind of kidding yourself, because once the problems in the neglected aspect catch up on you, you'll have trouble, and it's not going to be pretty. I see this because of my patients. I mean, I mostly see problems in their health, finances, and relationships, or all three combined. And it also affects their spiritual well-being. I see it all the time. So
Wow.
that's how I know that all these things are extremely important.
Interesting. Because then you lose faith, you lose hope. Everything's kind of pointless, huh? At that point.
Yeah, I mean, you start being angry and bitter and disappointed, and um, you gotta face your problems in every aspect of your life. I mean, you have to deal with these things for a reason, because in the present day and age, you need them. You need wealth so you don't get exploited. So in the United States of America, there are tons of ways to get wealthy legally. If you don't get wealthy here, where else are you going to get wealthy? If not this country, you still have a ton of opportunity. And then your health. Yeah, we have a health crisis, and it's the sickest population in the earth with the most advanced and most expensive medicine. So you got to ask yourself some questions. At the same time, there is a gym at every corner. There is organic food, which is still kind of uncontaminated,
Yeah.
hopefully, depending which market you go to. But there are ways to stay incredibly healthy. And then there are 95% of all the things in the grocery store that technically should be illegal because they cause chronic disease. They're not illegal.
Yeah.
But if you're aware of that, you just stop buying these products and you are maintaining your health at an optimal level, right? But it's all about your curiosity and acquiring knowledge. And the problem with today's age, the information age, that we're so bombarded with information that people really get tired and lose interest in anything because it's just
So quickly.
overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Watching two videos on one screen.
Yeah, and all
Yeah.
the commercial world, the people who are the worst businesses advertise all over the place, and the pharmaceutical companies with their constant advertisements on TV. I mean, that 20 years ago, that was unheard of. All these
Oof.
medication advertisements and cancer treatments, like it's a regular and completely acceptable thing. No, it's a
That's a good point.
horrible billion-dollar industry, trillion
That's a
dollar industry.
really good point. I don't think we talk about that enough, actually.
Oh, we can talk for
What
hours.
what key message do you want to resonate with your audience through your book specifically?
Whatever you're bothered by and want to solve, just start today. Start right away. Start yesterday. I mean, just quit procrastinating. It's so much to discover, and you will be amazed once you start solving your problems one by one, how much you actually can do. And in the end of the day, you'll be just like, why didn't I start earlier? What took me so long? So there is nothing to fear, guys. There is nothing to fear. If you're at a crossroads, if you're in a midlife crisis, that's a beautiful opportunity to rediscover yourself and just
I
get
know
started. It's nothing to fear.
I know this is a cliche question, but would you tell your younger self, anything specific?
That same thing I just told you now. I would, because I was extremely afraid of any changes and to change the concept about myself and how my life was. I was extremely afraid of failure. And it was just stupid. But we live in a world that expects perfection, and it's just not real. Imperfection is okay as soon as you learn from your mistakes and you don't repeat them. But you will make mistakes because these are the best learning opportunities. The problem is the academic world. We're taught in academia that mistakes are bad. Well, real life proves you otherwise.
On
And
top
to
of it,
switch,
it's turned into a name brand as well. Like academia used to mean something with prestige, right? Like it used to
right,
be a big deal to go to a expensive college, and now it's just a
exactly.
brand name.
Now it's a handicapping thing and a money sucking machine, basically, overpriced education that doesn't prepare you for real life. And it's
A
just
club.
sad. Mhm. Club, exactly.
Interesting. Um, so we're winding down to the last few questions here. Are there any like specific projects, initiatives you're particularly excited about? Maybe you want to share?
Yeah, projects. Well, I'm going to expand the coaching business with the number of student grows. One important thing in my concept about coaching is I don't make people dependent on my coaching. We have a short 12-week program and then a 1 year resource line. They can reach me at no additional price. And I'm really hopeful that they do have the questions. I completely expect them to, because um, otherwise they're not working on themselves, right? But the project is I really want to make more and more people self-reliant for a good reason. That is my big project, because I just know if I could do it. I never thought I could be self-reliant. And that means everybody else can do it. Everybody else can do it if I could do it. So if I can instill this in most people, that's very exciting for me. And I do it on a daily basis with anybody I work with. Some people grasp it slower, others faster. But this is very important to me because self-reliance is a huge asset. It's a great way to be rich, right? Um, and the more people realize that, I think we're going to have a better place to live because people will be more confident and more willing to share their confidence without being afraid of being used and taken advantage of.
Or made fun of, right? That's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Everybody's, yeah.
Yeah, that's the least of our problems being made fun of.
Yeah.
Priorities are just so weird right now that you don't know where to start sometimes. But um, it is exciting to know that you can make a difference in people's lives in any way. And I have lots of ways to do that because I mentor on investing, I mentor on health and relationships and meditation. So many things to offer. But um, the most exciting part is when you see a result 1% at a time. And that's that's incredibly good to see because people learn, and when they learn, it's just rewarding, very rewarding.
Um, Earlier in the podcast, we talked about like long-term goals and just how ambitious not just you are, but like how it's important for people to set like huge goals. So is there any specific big goal or dream that you're working towards, and how does it align with the themes of like you've explored in your book?
So yes, the huge goal is to one of the goals. Financially speaking, for example, I want in the next 4.5 years to pay off all of my investment properties. Okay. So that's a goal that I never thought it would happen. Now, of course, it's in line to happen. The point of a huge goal is to stretch your imagination in your mind into believing that you can do it. Because if you put yourself a crazy goal in front of yourself, or say, I have a goal to sell 3 million books, that's not a huge goal, right? And some people have sold 10 million books and they don't think that's a huge goal. So for you, the huge goal is different than my huge goal and somebody else's huge goal. But anything that seems impossible, yet you know it's possible and that you can do
Mm,
it, if
just
it's
far
exciting,
enough.
yeah, if it excites you, that's a great goal for yourself because then you can handle the smaller goals. And the problem for most people is when you have the insane goal and you see how many crazy and seemingly useless steps there are between now and the insane goal, you get discouraged. But
It's
if you
true.
put it in perspective, it all makes much more sense. And this is a very cliched thing to say that I just said, but it is
Mhm.
just so true. It's really the basics of anything that you do because you didn't learn to walk by just getting up and walking one day. You fell many, many times. But because you were a child, you didn't care that you were falling. You just got up and kept going. So as adults, we do the same thing, but we got to keep the curiosity because the child is curious to walk because he wants to see places that otherwise he can't touch and see and explore. It's the same with the insane goal. But we've been so mutilated mentally by the logic and what we studied in schools that the kind of tampers our imaginations and steps on them and said, no, no, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. And the creativity is compromised sometimes.
I'd also argue just how the definitions changed over time, like what we value, right? Like it it's we haven't been told to value experiences, and at the same time, how do we gain experience or knowledge if we don't do things, if we're stuck on material attractions and purchasing stuff? You don't ever get out in the world to grow and learn and experience things. So it's kind of ironic though that that's what we need to do, but we live in a culture that doesn't promote experience, right?
That's right. And I personally see nothing wrong with material attractions if gaining the material thing helps you learn some skills. I mean, required you to learn things and get more resourceful and learn something to gain that reward, if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But to have them just for the sake of displaying social status is what you're
Mm-hmm.
getting at. That's really sad. And you can see people never have enough and never have enough because they see that the more you gain, that doesn't guarantee happiness and satisfaction and real wealth. Because real wealth is in your state of being, in your state of mind. Real wealth.
Which is
And
another thing, like because we're elaborating on experience, right? So these are things that you wouldn't know aren't even important until you obtain it, and you're like, why do I still feel empty? Why am I not fulfilled? So it's hard to even tell people, hey, don't worry about these things, or it's not important, because it still
Right.
might be part of their journey to experience it, to learn, oh, I didn't need that. You can't really
Exactly.
just
Then
you can't
just
prevent
do
it.
the work and then reward yourself, see that it doesn't matter, and then define what really matters. And it's okay. I mean, Jim Carrey had this wonderful graduation speech when he said, I wish you, all of you guys have my money to see that money really isn't important at all at the end of the day. And I was very poor when I listened to that. And I knew that he was telling the truth, but I said, I really wish to experience what you're saying, dude. I want to have the money that you have to see that, well, there is much more to life. And now that I'm at that point, he was right. He was right 100%. But it's very hard to tell this to the person who hasn't gained even half of what you have gained, to
Yeah.
convince them in that. And it's logical because people want to have some sense of security. Like, and security is false, right? Security can be very false, but I think it's important for the person to achieve the sense of security that they perceive as important. So then they can see, oh, there are much higher worlds out there, and it's really not as secure as I thought, but it's okay. So let's see what else I can discover, because that was my case when I went into nursing. Okay. Oh, I'm going to have a job now. And then I hear all these complaints from all over the place from my senior nursing colleagues. This one is broke. That one has every disease known to man. I said, what is going on here? Why aren't you healthy? Why are you poor? What are you doing, people? And that's what made me ask all these questions. And then I discovered investing. Oh, another type of security. Okay, what are the risks of investing? Tremendous risks. How do you manage these risks, right? So I think we need to gain the things that we want to gain to challenge ourselves more. Because if we're like with nothing always, and nothing is, we don't get the opportunity to pursue the things we want, then we get desperate and bitter and really demotivated. And it happens to many people.
It's a pretty good way to wrap it. I don't know if you have any final words, but I would like to ask for your social media, online presence, any platforms. What's the most effective way to find you and the audience to
So
engage?
my website is holisticselfconfidence.com. And from the website, there are the links to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my X, and YouTube. So there are lots of ways to reach me, either through the website. I have a contact form. There is an email address in the coaching page. If when people are interested in coaching, they email me there. The book is there, obviously. The paperback is available through the website in the US only. The ebook is available through the website, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, and Smashwords. The ebook is everywhere if they want to buy
Have you
it.
is there any strategies you found effective for promoting your book? Any advice for that?
Interviews are great. Direct contact with people is also very good. Advertisement, and really, you have to impress yourself in as many places as possible for people to see you, see that you're legit, that you're serious about your business, right? Because if you only appear a couple of times here and there and hoping for a miracle to happen, it's not going to happen. It's a constant work in progress, constant searching of ways to get in front of people and tell them, hey, I can help you, and you can buy this book. It will be much cheaper than the coaching, because if you do 85% of what I described in the book, you won't need my coaching. I mean, honestly, it's the book I wish I could have read 16, 17 years ago. I would have been in perfect shape much earlier.
Yeah,
So,
it's a good point. Final words. I think you answered the more than rich question, which is usually my last one.
yeah, it's the mindset. It's your mind. It's your that's the more rich, that you can do anything with your mind that you want, but you have to really believe that you can do that and want it. The desire is a huge factor to success. Okay, then believe. You have to expect that it will happen, right? And also gratitude for every little success that you have, because it's one step further to your goal, and that's the main ingredients to success.
I also find it interesting how like your experiences seemed like pretty like angry at the world, right? A little resentment, like I don't want to say like making excuses, but that's kind of like what you had
Yes,
come from, right? Like complaining.
absolutely.
But but the reason I'm bringing it up was because this interview was like really inspiring. So I appreciate how you channeled and turned that into a different motivating factor for other people. Learn from your experience, you know?
Yeah, thank you. And I used lots of excuses. And again, if I was able to abandon this mindset, everybody can, because I was the queen of excuses. And I
Not
was, I really.
anymore. Not anymore, though.
No, no, it's reversible. It's learnable. The different mindset is learnable. Don't use the successful people thinking, oh, they're lucky because they never thought like me. Well, maybe not so much. You can learn to reverse your mindset once you determine that it's hurting you. Because a limiting belief is weak once exposed. So once you expose your limiting beliefs, then you can tell them, okay, go away. I'm going to substitute this belief with a different belief. So you clean the room from the limiting belief and you substitute with the good belief. And then you have to build it in your mind by repeating it, and practicing and internalizing it that way. It's work, but so what?
I'm taking this one to go work on my habits after this. So thank you for everything. I appreciate your time.
Most welcome.
This is
Such a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
bye. Thank you.